Welcome to Revolutionary Gazette. I'm Will. Today we're with one of the ALFAM member institutions, Colonial Plantation, and farmer Kevin Tobias is with me. Kevin, what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about plowing.
Great. Well, we normally talk Revolutionary War. I've got two plows here. Am I looking at two Revolutionary War plows?
You are not. You are looking at one Revolutionary War plow and one probably 19th century more Civil War era plow.
Okay, and that's actually an original plow.
It is. Yeah, we are borrowing it from our friends at Landis Valley Museum in Lancaster. And this is an original 18th century bar share plow.
Great. Well, why do we have the two from the 2 centuries here if we're going to talk about the Revolutionary War era?
Well, it shows how things changed. And it shows kind of the evolution of the plow technology. So our forefathers in the 18th century used plows like this, and they worked fine for them, but the technology still had a long way to grow.
Well, let me stop you there. And before we go to the technology, for somebody who lives in urban America and doesn't have a clue, you and I are dressed in funny clothes for an era, but what's the plow do for us?
Sure. So the plow, the way I like to think of plowing is it is digging on a large scale. And so plowing is an integral step in the production of our food. So in order to put seeds in the ground, we need to eliminate the growth that's on top, which a plow goes into the ground and it flips the soil and inverts it. So the things that are on top get flipped down below, and then you have bare dirt on top. And the things that were growing there start to decompose, they add nutrients back in the soil, and you have a fresh, clean slate in which to put your seeds down.
Great. And you get in front of the plow and pull this thing through the field, right?
So these tools depend upon draft power to use. And so horses, oxen, and mules are what's going to be used to pull a plow through the ground.
Great. So at Colonial Plantation, who does the plowing?
So we mainly use an ox to do our plowing. We have a horse who can plow too, but the ox is bigger and stronger and can pull a bigger plow for us. So we use the ox.
Great. Well, as I look at these two, talk to me about what I need to know about the parts of a plow and then what's instructive in looking between the two.
Sure. So the parts that are important are, this here is called the mold board. This is doing the turning action and flipping the soil. The front part here, this is called the share and has the point. This is what's doing your cutting. And the width of your share tells you how big a cut you're going to make. This is a 16-inch plow, so it's going to make a 16-inch cut of soil, ideally if you're lined up correctly.
And what are we cutting today?
We're going to be using a smaller plow than this one. We're going to be using a 6-inch plow.
Great. Well, you're talking to me a lot here in something that feels like a Civil War era.
Sure.
Revolutionary War. Let's go look at this original from our friends at Landis. What's common and what?
So, I mean, all the parts are still pretty much here. It's just different. So the mold board here is completely made of wood. So, I mean, this has been shaped out with chisels and draw knives. You can see that the angle here isn't nearly as steep as the 19th century one is.
What does that do? What does that, how does that change?
It's not going to flip the soil as easily. It's not going to be able to get that right angle to flip it. And that being said, just because there's a steeper angle there doesn't mean that's a perfect plow, because the angle is going to correspond especially to soil. And so you're going to want to plow with the right angle for your soil. So this plow might work great 25 miles down the road, but it might not be the perfect one for here.
Where this one might be great for here.
It could be. And so often there were as many varieties of plows as there were animals to pull them.
Great.
And so yes, this is entirely made of wood. There's a piece here. This is kind of the bar share, kind of equivalent to the clevis there that's doing the initial kind of cut made from wrought iron, and then it's sitting on a piece of wrought iron as well. And these pieces here are especially here to take some of the friction and the force off the wooden mold board. Because as you might imagine, wood is going to wear down a lot quicker in the soil than cast iron is. So that's going to be a lot more durable in the 19th century than our 18th century equivalent is.
But in the Revolutionary War era, less metal equals cheaper and easier to produce.
And you can make it. I mean, a lot of farmers are probably just making their own plows. And this is probably a very nice example of an 18th century plow. I can imagine much even cruder plows than this that your dad would have just put together to use. And there were a lot of improvements in the plow technology occurring in the 18th century, though a lot of it was happening over in Europe. And the ideas from Europe hadn't fully come across the ocean yet. And sure, Thomas Jefferson and George Washington were well aware of what was going on, just the everyday human farmer wasn't. But those ideas were beginning and they were aware, but it really wasn't until the mid 19th century that things started to be put into practice. And so plows started being made out of cast iron, which made them stronger, and it made them smoother so the dirt didn't stick to the plow as much. The dirt would stick to a plow in the 18th century a lot more, this wood.
Okay. Well, Kevin, as I look at the flat side of both the plows, I see this isn't so flat. There's a curve here, and that's pretty flat. What's the difference between them?
That's a very good observation. So yes, on the land side of the 19th century plow, you see a curve.
The land side?
It's the land side. So this is the side of the plow that's facing, what you will, the land. So you're cutting and you're flipping your furrow there, but you still have solid ground on the back side here, or the land side.
Okay.
And so there's a curve here. There's a curve on the back face here where I'm touching, and that keeps the plow suctioned up to the side, the land that you're plowing away from. And then underneath it, if you look at the front of the share, that's touching the ground. It kind of goes up in the air and it comes back down towards the back of the land side. And that keeps the plow suctioned down into the furrow so it stays in place. And hopefully, if your animal's walking, your plow should stay and just go right behind him nice and clean.
Okay, well, let's go back to the Revolutionary War. What's the difference
what you see here is this is flat. So it's flat on the land side and it's flat on the underside of the land side as well. So it doesn't have that angle. So the plow doesn't have a natural suction to kind of stay into the ground. And so this plow is going to naturally kind of want to keep jumping out of the ground and away from you, whereas this one in the 19th century should not do that.
Okay.
So it's an improvement that was certainly made. And it might not seem like much, but it goes a long way to making the plow a more efficient tool, which makes, cultivating your fields all the better.
And what are I see two pieces of metal here around all the wood construction.
Sure.
What are the two major pieces
So
here?
this piece down here that's underneath the mold board is the bar share, which is kind of where this style of plow gets its name from. And then you have a piece up front here, which is a coulter, which is kind of a cutting mechanism. And so depending on the angle of this, you can make this more acute. It's going to do a little more cutting. And if it's more down like this, it's not going to be quite as strong at cutting.
Okay. Well, we've seen the two plows here.
Yep.
What's the next step? We have rust. We have the plow.
Sure.
Rust, of course, is your ox.
Yes.
How do we connect the dots?
Sure. So you have to find a way to utilize the animal's power. And so we humans, when we want to pull something, we would use our hands. And obviously, cattle and horses don't have hands. And so we have equipment that we put on them so that their power can be utilized in pulling the equipment we want. So for the ox, for example, we're going to use a yoke.
Well, I hear this is a fairly efficient process. Kevin, let's get Rust ready to go. What do
Sure.
I need to do?
So this is a single yoke for a single ox. And so it has two parts to it. There is this part, which is called the beam, and then this part that I'm holding is called the bow. And the ox yoke is a pretty simple technology. It's something that any farmer back then could have made with a draw knife. Make yourself free. And what we're going to do is we're going to take that pin out here. And so now this beam is going to go and sit on top of his neck. And there's a muscle here. This is what's doing a lot of our heavy lifting. The bow goes underneath, fits in the other side. Drops in like so, and we're ready to go.
So we're out near the field getting ready to plow, and I see Rust is all ready to go. What do you need to check before we plow?
The most important thing to have a successful day of plowing is to make sure that our plow sets at the right depth. And right now we're using a 6-inch plow. And that means it's going to cut, ideally, a 6-inch furrow through the ground. And the depth of that furrow should be about 3 inches or half the width of the plow. And so we don't want to be too deep at, say 6 inches down, or be too shallow at, say, only an inch or two. So how do we get it just right? And what we want to look at is something called the angle of draft. And so what you want to do is you want to have a straight line from Rust's yoke through his traces, which are the chains, to the middle of our mold board here. And we have a string here to kind of demonstrate that. If that string pretty much runs straight from his yoke right to the middle of our plow, that means we're about in the ballpark that our plow should set at about the right depth, and we should be ready to plow well.
Okay.
And again, if it's too long, if our chains are too long, our plow is too deep, and if our chains are too short, our plow is going to be too shallow.
All right. Well, he's set up. You've done this before. I haven't done it in this century. Let's go over and learn a bit.
Let's do it.
Okay, Kevin, Rust is hooked up. The traces are set. What do we do?
So now we trust in the superior strength of the ox. So right now I'm set up to drive the animal, and you're set up to be driving the plow. And so I'm going to start walking him forward. You're going to hold the handles of the plow. And when we get to the ground, you're going to lift the handles up. It's going to sink the plow into the ground. And we're going to walk and we're going to make a furrow. We're going to walk down and make a furrow, and we're going to come back and make more furrows.
Okay, so what's a furrow?
A furrow is, think of the plow like a big shovel. And so we're basically dragging this big shovel through the ground, and that length is kind of what your furrow is. So the ground that we're flipping over is going to be our furrow. So we're using the plow as a shovel to walk through the soil, and what the living stuff on top is getting inverted and flipped over, so you have clean dirt on top that we're going to put our seeds into.
Okay. And how do we do that?
We have me driving, and then you have someone back controlling the handles of the plow. And when we get up to the line of the furrow, you just lift the handles up, which gets the plow to sink in, and then it's going to ride itself through. It sets itself.
And how about side to side?
So that's where plowing can be a little bit tricky, because it always to me seems like it's backwards. So maybe it'll make sense to you. But when you're holding the plow, when you lean to your left, that will make the plow go to the right. And when you lean to your right, that will make the plow go to the left.
So opposites.
Opposites, which is how it always appears in my mind. Some people, to them, it makes complete sense.
Are you able to look back and watch me? Because I've plowed once with 2 horses in a completely different century.
Sure. Well, the mechanics are the same. That's in some ways the nice thing about plowing. The technology might have improved with the plow, but then the mechanics of how you do it hasn't changed all that much.
Shall we?
We shall. So I'm going to bring you up to the furrow, and then we'll let you get set up with the plow. Come on.
Just let it ride right that.
Okay.
Yeah, just leave it just like that. And then you're just going to hold up like that, and then once we start going, it's just going to set itself.
Okay, and I lean left to go right and right to go left.
Correct. And if you hit a rock or something and you need to get back down, just lift your handles up a little bit.
Okay.
Bring you right back down. Okay, first come up. Up. Come up.
Seems like I'm way off.
You're not that far off. Okay, so now I'll push it off to the right, like drop the handle to the ground.
And there we go.
Good.
If you just want to pick it up, we'll just make a tight turn. And often he goes a little quicker this way because he sees the barn.
Heads towards the grain.
Exactly. So whenever you're ready.
Ready when you are.
Come up first.
And opposite. So leaning to my left so that we get back a little more right. So we're about 6 inches, and he is ready for grain. Wow. And there's the opposite.
Yep.
And back in it. And at that point, we'll throw it that way.
Lovely.
So this is as much you driving for position. And then once we get here, I do just the end of it, right?
And pretty much, I'm doing the majority of the work here.
Okay.
If I drive you straight, ideally the plow should go straight.
Fantastic.
Opposed from hitting a rock. So you're there just to kind of make minor corrections.
Good.
To me, plow has always kind of been a skill of minimalism for the driver there.
Okay. Shall we take one more wrap?
Oh yeah, as many as you like.
And now right will send me left.
Yep. Go to your right. Nice.
Fantastic. Well, I can see where the stuff came up. I had to lift the back of the plow up to get it back down and in.
Yep, perfect.
I'll tell you this,
You
Kevin.
get the feel for it.
This sure gives you an idea what it would take, and I'm huffing and puffing just a little bit from this, but you
Right.
do.
And this is not this is nowhere near an acre yet. So
No, absolutely. As we look here, what is it? Is there an acre down here in this field area?
what we have kind of in this rectangle is probably about a half acre.
And a day's work for plowing is?
A pair of oxen could do an acre a day.
Okay.
Would be kind of what a good in-shape team you could expect from them.
And then you'd rest them and move on to other farm chores and come back
Well,
the
that would
next day.
take you the whole day to do it with your oxen. So you get up good and early and you'd plow all day until sunset and you'd have an acre.
Great. Well, I tell you, Kevin, thanks for giving me this little bit of experience and letting everybody else see what it takes to plow in the Revolutionary War
Thanks
world.
for giving it a try.
hey, it's a lot of fun. So thank you for watching Revolutionary Gazette. We hope you found another small connection to life in the Revolutionary War era. We're going to keep going on things here at Colonial Plantation. We'll see you another time. Well, shall we get them back in?